Do you want to start the questioning, Julian, or would you rather just watch that happen today?
I can start. I guess we can still alternate until I,
You
tap out.
okay?
This is good. It might lead to some very interesting questioning, depending on how many painkillers you've taken.
Even more confusion than usual.
What kind of pain? Depends on what kind of painkiller. So are we recording on Zen?
Yeah, Zen is recording.
Okay.
By the way, when you do the transcripts, Russ, you take the timestamp from the video I send, or is it always from that video?
I take the timestamps from the video that actually has a timestamp on the recording. Okay. So if you put a clock on, that's the clock that I would use for the timestamp.
Yeah. I think for one of them, there's some, I got to look into the time issues. I think on day one, there were a couple. But I think for these later ones, it's fine because the clock's on from the beginning. All right.
I don't think I've had any difficulties with the clocks that I know of. It's quite possible that I haven't seen them.
So I think for day one, you put the clock on later, maybe something got...
I think maybe I put the clock on later, but when I put the clock on, I matched it with the time that was on the video.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I got to look back into it.
So I don't think there are any issues. Let's put it this way. There aren't any issues that I know of.
Okay. It was like 15 seconds off in parts from the video I was watching. But yeah, I just got to go through and make sure I'm watching the right video. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Should we do beep one?
Yep.
Yes, we will. Okay, so I did them this morning. So first one went off at 10:13, and I was waiting for a coffee, looking at a photo of a tote bag I bought recently on my phone, and I was just looking at it. I was kind of admiring it, but there was no thought process per se. I was just looking at it, admiring it.
Mm-hmm. Was this looking at the photo? Was that in your experience consciousness, or was it the action that happened to be going on at this time?
I'm not sure. What's the distinction there? I definitely was.
I guess if this is a nothing moment and that was just the current action, or if it was actually something experienced.
Yeah, no, I think the reason, I put here, admiring it, ? So this, I think it wasn't a nothingness sort of thing. I was looking at it and mulling something over about it. So I think I was thinking.
Okay. So before I think you said something like there wasn't a huge thought component, so how would you characterize this mulling kind of admiring?
I would say, I put one other thing after that actually that I didn't read. I wrote, I found the design soothing ?
Soothing, okay.
So
you think there was specifically something about the photo you were admiring, or was clear content not there?
I don't think clear content was there. I was definitely looking at this image that I'd taken of the tote bag and then looking at the tote bag specifically within that photo. But other than that, it was just looking at that and mulling that over. And I guess in terms of mulling that over, what that could be characterized by was, I think, those sort of words that I've tried to use there, admiring it or finding something soothing about it. I was, I guess, in a way, sort of just looking at it and feel it was pleasurable sort of for some reason. Obviously that's why I bought this tote. I really like it. But I wasn't, I wasn't saying a sentence oh, I like this tote, or I'm glad I bought that tote. It wasn't like that. It was looking at it and mulling over. I think it goes kind of last week when I was saying that sort of vibey experience, that.
So a sort of vibey thing.
Mm-hmm.
Would you call it, I guess it doesn't matter. I was going to ask if you would call it more a vibe or a feeling, but I guess it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you call it so long as.
But yeah, in that realm, definitely of like, that's an important distinction here. Like this wasn't a nothing. There was a me looking at something and the mulling that over is, I think, when I'm in that category of like feeling vibey, state of being-y, something almost emotional, but that using the word emotional, like I was saying last week with feeling, perhaps feels too like consciously present. I would say it's like a rung down below that.
Okay, below feeling, so a bit maybe less present. Could I just get some context? It's like a tote bag, this picture you took, or it's like
the picture I took. Do you want to say the tote bag? It's really nice.
Sure.
This is a tote bag. Leon's Bagels in New York.
Leon's Bagels. Never been
So
there.
I literally just taken a photo of it on my phone and sent that picture to my sister yesterday. And so when I was standing at the coffee shop this morning waiting for my coffee, sometimes when I'm waiting for a coffee, this bit too much context now, but sometimes I'll just look at my camera roll when I'm just waiting. And I was just looking at that photo and just thinking, I was just kind of admiring it.
So kind of okay. So you're looking at this photo. There's kind of an admiring, soothing, pleasurable.
Mm-hmm.
Would any in particular of those descriptions be closest to describing it, or is it kind of just vague and vibey? Or
vague. That is a word that I haven't been using, but that is correct. All these vibey experiences that I'm trying to describe are vague, sort of emotional, so vague feelings. Like vague feels nice there to describe what that feels like.
Okay, because it's not specific content. It's not specifically,
Yes.
I like this about that.
Yes.
And it's not a super strong feeling. It doesn't have a bodily location.
Yes, and it's not. Yeah, there's not like a.
Sorry, I mean, I actually didn't ask about that. You could correct me if I'm wrong. But.
No, I really like it. I think that this is nice, and because it's not there's not a sharpness to it. So vague feels like a nice descriptor.
Okay, this kind of soothing, pleasurable.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything else in experience?
Not that I can recall.
And I think I'm good.
So I want to make sure that I've got the distinction between I'm looking pleasurably, soothingly at this picture, or I'm looking at this picture and I am sort of separately noticing it as being pleasurable, soothing.
No, I'm not noticing it at the time. When the beep goes off and I'm trying to reflect on what it was like, then I can identify that. But at the time, there's not that meta level of I'm looking at this and noting that I'm feeling pleasure. Yeah.
That's the way I understood it.
But great.
That's how I understood it. I don't know if I conveyed it more meta, although sometimes when I talk, like it can maybe come across more meta.
Number 2.
Okay, this one's like a little bit embarrassing and makes me sound like a fangirl, but this went off at 10:28 and I was walking back home from getting coffee and I was walking down Ludlow Street in the Lower East Side thinking about what I would say to Matty Healy if I ran into him before his concert tonight. And I've noted this because the thought was specific. So there was a specific thought. I was thinking like, what would I say to him if I ran into him on the street? And the specific thought was like when the beat went off, I was thinking I would say, I love the performance art and cultural commentary you're doing at the moment. And I've written, I wasn't visualizing meeting him, but I was definitely midway through considering what I would say if I met him. And it wasn't my voice saying the words though, it was conceptual, but it was a really distinct thought. It's a bit embarrassing. So for context, Russ, this guy is like the lead singer of a band.
Okay. And so the thought was something like, I love the performance art that you're currently doing. Is that right?
Yeah, the exact sort of the thought was, I love the performance art and cultural commentary you're doing at the moment. That was the exact thought I had when the beat went off.
So that's a pretty specific thing.
Yeah.
And do you mean it to be that specific? That it was that specific at the moment?
Mm-hmm. Because I was really in the process of like genuinely kind of articulating exactly, like I was in this embarrassing fantasy land, but I was really like articulating exactly what I would say to him if I met him. So when it went off, I was like in the process of like working out the exact words that I would say. Sorry, my thing just went off. So as the beep went off, that was like the conceptual sentence that I was sort of that I would say.
So I would like to understand what conceptual sentence is. Is that in some way different from just a regular sentence?
Yeah, what I was trying to articulate there is that it's still not audio, like it's still not my voice saying that, but I know that I'm forming that sentence, if that makes sense.
And that exact sentence, not just the concept that could be put into words, that would be something like, well, I love the performance art and conceptual, whatever. I can't read it because my eyes are dilated, but whatever it is that you said, what I want to know is, are those specific words present to you, or is it just a concept that is so tight that that's the only way that you could put it into words?
That's a really good question. And a hard distinction to make, because at first I was like super sure of that, of like, no, it was definitely the words. But then if I'm thinking about like, really, really the inner experience of how that sentence was being formulated, then I guess I am leaning back towards more like a really tight concept rather than the words, maybe. But this feels really gray.
And does that grayness seem to come from, I just can't be sure. At the moment, it seemed like it was words, but now I've lost my nerve about that? Or is it that, as best I can tell, I don't really know?
Yeah, no, I think it's more coming down to what my inner experience sort of looks like and how to sum it up. So I think I get like, I'm like, oh, this was a distinct thought that I was having. I was formulating this sort of sentence and playing out this scenario in my head. Okay, well, was that specific words, blah, blah, like, then that's where that vagueness and the gray sort of comes in, because then I go back to, well, all those really simple descriptors don't actually fit the experience right. Like, it wasn't me saying that sentence out loud, even though I'm sure of the content of that concept, and, so that's where the confusion comes in.
Well, let's set aside let's set aside the fact that if it were in words, it would have to be in a voice or something like that, because I think words can be present by themselves without a voice, or they can be in a voice, and the voice could be spoken or heard, or any other combination you could probably imagine. Mm-hmm. So the question is, at the moment of this beep, as best we can say, mm-hmm. were those specific words present somehow, even though they might not have been spoken or heard? Yes. So we are confident that the words were there. These are the words. Yep. And where we lose confidence is about the manner in which those words are present.
Yes.
It seems like the words are there, but it's less than my speaking them and less than mm-hmm. my hearing them, even though all this we're talking about innerly. There's no question about, I didn't say these words out loud. Mm-hmm. These words were somehow present to me. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, because it was really specifically like the exact way, like, saying performance art before cultural commentary and all, like, that's exactly what was happening at that time, like structuring it that way.
Okay. And by structuring, do you mean in some sort of semi-auditory way, that like there's articulation and intonation and pausing stuff?
No, I just mean more the phrasing.
Okay. So the phrasing is very specific. The manner in which it is apprehended is not specific.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
Okay. And this is, excuse me, this is an imaginary conversation. This is, I'm imagining saying, what's the guy's name?
Maddie Healy.
Maddie?
Yes.
Maddie Healy. Yeah. And so I'm imagining saying it to him. This is words directed to him. Is that right? As opposed to, for example, I'm telling my sister, this is what I might say if I met him. That would be a conversation somehow aimed at my sister, even though it's about him. This is somehow these words are aimed at him in your imagination.
Yeah, it was very much like, if I ran into him on the street while I'm walking, what would I say to him? And that's the sentence that I was going to say to him.
And is the lead up to that, if I ran into him on the street, what would I say to him? Is that in words as well? I realize that's before the beep, but had that been in words, or was this at the moment of the beep? I can't really tell you what was going on before that. At the moment of the beep, all I can say is I'm articulating in some way, creating these words aimed at him.
The concept was there, like in the same way that I was mulling over looking at my tote bag in the earlier beep. I would say that, like, yeah, prior to the beep, I was like mulling over the idea of like what I would say to him, but was that like fully formed words or whatever? Not necessarily, but there was definitely like that then led to when the beep went off and I was in that thought process. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. And is there anything else in your experience other than this worded stuff?
I don't think so. Like, there wasn't like really much feeling associated with it for one, which is kind of interesting for me because often a lot of my inner experience is quite vibe-based and stuff that we said before, but that wasn't really relevant. I know I was outside and walking home and stuff, but my environment wasn't really experienced. And then I guess you're like probably half alluding to whether there was any like visual aspect within my mind about this sort of imaginary scenario, but I don't think there was.
Okay. And we've talked about embarrassment and whatever. I'm gathering that embarrassment is in the context today, now, while we're having this conversation. It wasn't present at the moment of the beep. Is that right?
No, because that's inside my head. I was living my best life. But then when the beep went off, I was like, well, this is going to be funny.
Okay. That's the way I understood it, but I want to make sure. And I think I'm good.
I have a couple of other questions.
Mm-hmm.
So you say you don't think there's a visual aspect of like seeing him and talking to him. Mm-hmm. Is there still some aspect of it being a conversation scenario, or at this moment is it more about the words present?
No, that's really hard to answer because like I'm definitely thinking about the moment of like, oh, if I ran into him and I, would interrupt him and say this or something like that's, but there's no, it's really hard to explain, but like that's just conceptual.
Okay. And my other question is, kind of mentioned being in the process of articulating. Mm-hmm. Was it something that happened over time? Like maybe you were articulate, like I love the performance art and cultural commentary, and then the beep comes and then it's like you're doing it at the moment. Or is there not kind of this, is it linear or no, or like all at once, or you don't know?
As in, if I think I understand your question correctly, like this sort of happened over, a period of, I don't know, 45 seconds or 30 seconds or something. As I'm walking, I was in the middle of, so the first, I guess thought in this direction was like, I wonder if I ran into him, what I would say. And then for the next 30 seconds, I kind of am just like my brain's just firing off sort of phrases or whatever. That's all happening quite intuitively, but that's the process that I'm in. So it wasn't necessarily like the beep went off and that was the first thought I'd had about this. Like I was in the process of sort of mulling over what I would say.
Okay. I want to stick just to this specific phrase at the moment.
Okay.
Because if you said it out loud, like it would be something that takes place over time. Like I love the performance art that blah, blah, blah. And maybe a beep could fall at any one, like between a word or at any word, or maybe after everything finishes. And in your experience at this moment, is this something that happens over time, or is it maybe
I see what you're saying.
So yeah. I would say that question, I think is a great question. And I would ask it by, does it seem like these words unfold over time? Or does it seem like they're all present at the same time?
Definitely the easier way to ask it.
No, but I understood what you meant eventually. Good question. I think, wait, let me actually think before I speak there. It's tight. Like I think that they do unfold over time, but really quickly. But I think that there is like cadence or something there, but it's not at the same, it's not like at a rate of, if like, because as you pointed out, if I say that out loud, that sentence takes quite a while to say. It happens quicker in my brain, but I think it does unfold a little.
So quicker, and you think it does take place over time, but it still sounds like you're not like 100% sure how it happens.
But like a lot quicker. Like it's if anything, it's closer to all being there at once compared to the rate of speaking.
Okay.
But I think there's a slight unfolding. Yeah.
Okay.
So what I would say about that is that the fact that you're unsure about it is a good deal from my point of view. And no matter what you said, I'm not going to believe you about it because you weren't prepared to make that distinction at the only time that you could have made that distinction, which would have been right at the moment of the beep. But now we've had this conversation, and if you have this kind of this experience next time we sample or whatever, then I might be in a position to be saying, well, Mel knows what she's talking about here, and she can answer that question.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a good question, Julian.
Thanks. Yeah, those are all my questions on this one.
Number 3.
On to number 3.
Okay, I've got 11:04 a.m. and I was back in my apartment, and I was on Twitter, or X, whatever, but I still call it Twitter. I was on Twitter just looking mindlessly at my feed, and I've written, I would say things were pretty empty here. Nothing particularly noteworthy. I was looking at my phone, aimlessly scrolling, not really aware of anything that I was consuming.
So you're scrolling, it's been mindless and empty, and so it sounds like, or do you think something was there, or something very minimal, or nothing?
This feels like autopilot-y. This doesn't feel like the earlier one with the tote bag where I was mulling something over and there was like a vibe and a vague sort of feeling. None of that was present for this. This felt more like that autopilot emptiness.
Okay, more of the emptiness. And I take it your eyes are visually pointed at the screen, but do you think that is, you're experiencing that at all? Or it's just kind of a fact of what's happening?
Yeah, like not super consciously. It's more, I would put it in the fact category.
Okay. And those are all my questions about this one.
So would you say that you are in any way getting any of the content that's coming by? These are, I presume, words going by or pictures going by or whatever. Is that something making its way at all into your?
I mean, they have to a degree, but
they don't have to. They don't have to. Whether they do or not is the question.
Well,
so it's possible. So the distinction I want to be making here is that it's possible to be scrolling and skillfully scrolling. You know, you're doing what your hand has to do in order to make things go by, and in some way processing the whole scene. I mean, you're holding the phone, you're scrolling in the right place on the phone, your eyeballs are tracking whatever, but none of that has to be in awareness at all. Or it could be that I got a sense that this is Twitter from, Greenwich Village, and this is Twitter about Hamas, and this is Twitter about whatever, or not.
I think the distinction, like I think the first bit that you said is more accurate, but the distinction that I found challenging when I was like writing this down straight after the beat was whether it was just to do with like none of the content was particularly interesting to me, so like nothing was really sticking. So in terms of like the inner experience element of that, like I found that a little bit challenging to sort of decipher, because it's like, well, I'm just not really interested in anything I'm seeing, or am I like fully glazed over and doing just the action? Do you know what I mean?
Well, something can be processing at a very low level, and when it's interesting, then it would grab you, or whatever, how you ever want to say that, and then you might read it. So it's sort of like the cocktail party and name phenomenon. I'm not listening to anything, but then if somebody says my name, then I can hear that. So obviously there's part of me that is auditorily processing the cocktail party. And so there can be, in the same way, some kind of visual semantic processing of but not making its way into consciousness. So in the cocktail party, I would never say, well, I didn't hear my name there, and I didn't hear my name there, and I didn't hear my name there. That isn't the way that stuff goes. It's that I'm doing the processing, but it's outside of my direct apprehension.
Yes, very much that.
And so is that what we're saying here, is that my sense is that I'm somewhere below the footlights of my consciousness, out of the lights of my consciousness, processing this stuff, and it isn't making its way in at all?
I think so, yep.
Okay. And I'm good.
I'm good. I do have a meta question. So we kind of talked about it a bit in the transcripts, like different terminology and kind of speculating what you understand by that. And I'm curious from your perspective, Mel, if we say like before the footlights of your consciousness, like what you understand by that, and if it makes sense or just kind of makes sense.
I think that I understand that as when I use the layman's terms of like doing this, I feel like that's the same sort of thing when I'm going. It was kind of like below that level. I feel like that's the same sort of, you just say it better, but like before the footlights of your consciousness of like, yeah, when there's sort of some sort of presence, but you're not like hyper aware of it or something. Is that right?
So, that sounds good to me. Yeah.
It's not very like articulate, but
well, I guess before the footlights can mean if something's out of the footlights, it's not even there at all, really, in your experience. Like as Russ says, you might, if somebody says your name at a cocktail party, you might pay attention, but before that, like paying attention if people saying your name isn't at all experienced. But, yeah, I think the gist of things being like, I think this visual representation of things being like lower or higher in consciousness is pretty
so the way I use that term I think is a little bit different from what Mel said, and that is that I would say once it's in the footlights of your consciousness, it can be all the way up to be brightly in the footlights of your consciousness. So I would say, for example, I love your performance art, or whatever that sentence was, that was clearly before the footlights of my consciousness. It had somehow made its way into my direct apprehension. Centrally, not just a little bit, but pretty darn centrally, as I understood it.
Yeah, that one was, I mean, we haven't had too many of those examples where I'm very confident in a really distinct thought. So that was kind of interesting.
And I would say the tote bag was before the footlights of my consciousness. I was somehow apprehendingly involved with my tote bag stuff, but not as brightly as in the.
Should we do number 4?
Yes.
Okay. Number 4.
Russ, take it away.
This went off not long after at 11:12 a.m. and I've written, I was putting washing away. So I'm in my apartment still. I was putting washing away, very much lost in the action of doing that. I had music on in the background, which was definitely part of my conscious experience.
So there's the action and the hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And are the action and the hearing both, as we might say, before the footlights of my consciousness? Or
Mm-hmm. I think the music more so, like the music was on in the background and I was very aware of that, and then more like the act of putting away my laundry was just like autopilot, what I was doing sort of thing.
So 60-40 or 90-10 or 99-1, or doesn't that make sense?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Okay. And so about the music is the most prominent thing in my experience. Is that true?
Yeah, but I still think that this whole thing falls a little more in like a bit autopilot-y. So I don't think anything was super, super sharp. Like I definitely felt the need to write down that the music was experienced and part of the experience when the beat went off, but and likewise with the action of the putting the washing away, but like I like the phrase that I wrote where I was very much lost in the action. So it's kind of not as, I wasn't necessarily mulling over each of those sorts of things. I was like going about this sort of A to B category a bit, you know?
So I could interpret loss in the action in a variety of different ways. So loss in the action could mean to me, I'm just not attending to it at all. I'm totally autopilot engaged in it. The action is coming out of me. And so it's lost in the sense that I'm not consciously, whatever that means, processing it. Yeah. Or lost, it could mean I'm absorbed in it. I'm actually examining the washing, or I'm feeling the texture of the clothing or whatever. And,
I think it was slightly more the latter. Like I think I was like aware of the textures and things like that, but getting hazy.
And texture was my word, or my suggestion. There's other ways that you could be into the washing action. I could smell the detergent, or I could remember when I wore this thing, or I could remember that I need to use woolite instead of whatever. And
no, none of that. I think like the physicality of it was an element. Yeah, I think like I was absorbed in the action. There was not a meta awareness of like I'm aware of myself being aware of the washing, like not that, but like I was definitely like present in what I was doing, I think.
But I'm gathering not really strongly.
I think so, yeah.
So when I said 90-10 or 60-40 and you had trouble with that, maybe if I had said 6-1 or 6-2 or something, then that may have been better.
Yeah. I think like for most of the times when I'm, if the beat goes off and I'm in the middle of doing like a physical activity, then I often describe it as autopilot. And this wasn't full autopilot. Like I think there was sort of an awareness, but yeah, a low level, because it tends to be low when I'm doing something or whatever.
And the music more so than the washing, but not much.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And are you specifically aware of the music that as you would say that I was listening to Beyonce or whoever it was that was on, or is it just there's music and I'm somehow in synchy with the music, whatever it is?
No, I know it was relevant because I was listening to Matty Healy's band, the 1975, who we talked about earlier, because I'm going to that concert tonight. So clearly you can see my brain's thinking about that. So yeah, the music that was on was, yeah, part of my conscious experience.
Okay. Then I think I'm good.
Was it a specific part of that song at the moment?
I haven't written that down. It's like I couldn't even tell, like I can't remember what song it was now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think if theoretically you did remember and got to that specific, 5 or 10 seconds of the song, do you think we would know more about your experience at this moment? Or do you think the actual content of the music was not what mattered?
No, because I would put it in the category of like it just being more holistic than the specific content of that exact time. It's just like a holistic, like, layer beyond that of like a vague vibe feeling. So it's not like
I'm a vibey feeling part present too, or was it more just about the music?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I just wrote that the music was definitely part of my conscious experience. I think like if I, at risk of overthinking, but if I did speculate, I would say there's like there was like a lightness and a happy sort of vibe as a result of the conscious experience of the music, but
Okay. So as Russ said before, since you're not sure, that's something that however he phrased it, if on a later day you report that, yeah, I remember when we first started, I would phrase that wrong. Like it's something you could pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
That's something not to not say. Okay. Yeah, I don't have any more questions about this.
Okay, number 5.
Oh yeah, this went off not long after 11:18 a.m. and I was singing along to the song that was on while packing my suitcase. I wrote, my inner experience was happy as I bopped along. This was not empty. I've written what? This was not empty. Definitely had a vibe present. Good notes.
So you're packing your suitcase, and is that at all apprehended?
Like, it's not more than just running through the motions of doing that.
Okay, and you're still listening to music?
Yep, but on this occasion I was singing out loud along to the music.
Singing out loud. And was the singing just an action, or was it also an action that you experienced before these footlights of consciousness?
No, I'd say it was like reactive. So like it was just happening.
Okay, so the singing in the suitcase were just happening. But the happy, vibey feeling thing, that was there.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other details you could give about it?
This felt very emotional, not emotional, but like, yeah, this was definitely a very feelings-based experience. Like I remember when this went off, that was the overwhelming takeaway, that this was that.
Was it strong? Maybe a bit stronger than earlier beeps?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a way you could describe the strength, or would that not make sense?
I feel like I can't quite remember properly, but I feel like we had one like this last week when I was saying that, trying to sum up like when I have the vibe type experience. I feel like this felt like that of yeah, that same thing is like, it's not like a beep goes off and I go, whoa, I was feeling like so clearly, distinctly, sharply happy or optimistic or anything. But I think that there's a bunch of those descriptors that would be really relevant in that layer down, everything covered with a sort of veil.
So, but in terms of intensity,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm hearing or understanding is kind of like beep number one with a tote bag, that would be less intense. And this one was like stronger, but maybe not full, like clearly, specifically, boom.
Yeah.
Is that apt?
Yeah. Definitely stronger than the tote bag and stuff, and definitely feelings present and whatnot, but still not like sharp. But I'm not sure if I don't know. It would be on a rare occasion that I would feel something that sharply, probably.
Is there a kind of content to it, like happiness about seeing the concert later, happiness about the music and dancing along?
No, just an overwhelming like mood. Yeah, I feel like there was one, like this last week when I was trying to sum that up, of like, it's just when it catches me in that vibe state, a state of being that feels happy, and it felt optimistic and it felt light and it felt sort of a bit fun, but none of those descriptions feel like overwhelmingly the exact one.
Is the music experienced at this moment, or is it more about the mood?
I think the mood is a little more accurate, probably. Like the singing along and the music that's playing is definitely like what is impacting that, but like ultimately, like the main experience is that feeling, mood, emotion, vibe, more so than like the specific notes of the music or whatever.
Okay. And I'm curious because a few times you mentioned it being overwhelming or something, but you also mentioned it's not super strong and articulate. So is there a way to understand that? Is it because we also had samples before where, it was the previous sampling day where something was overwhelming or consuming or whatever because there wasn't much else in experience, and that was the only thing there. Could you compare it to those, or do you mean it in a different sense? Or maybe overwhelming was just a word you used, and we don't have that word.
I think you're right when you say like it just there are two different ways that I could use that word. Like sometimes an emotion can be like so strong it's overwhelming, and then but another way that I have used it is overwhelming in the sense that like blocking out any other thing that's experienced, but the intensity of that emotion or whatever still might not be like overwhelming. So I think that's a good pickup there. I think that this was if I've used overwhelming, then this is in the sense that it's drowning out any other experience. So like that vibe is the thing being experienced, and nothing else aside from like the music, but not the specifics of the music, just the overall experience.
And not the suitcase packing itself, and not the singing along to it.
Yeah, no, like
sense. Okay.
If there was like layers to what was experienced, then it's like the mood, vibe, whatever, probably then the music, and then probably then, if at all, the like physical action of packing my suitcase.
Okay, if at all, the packing the suitcase.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I understood it, the listening to the music was present, maybe present, and the singing along to the music you put kind of on the level of suitcase. So maybe probably not there, or only there a tiny bit.
Yeah, maybe a little more than the suitcase, but it's still like pretty reactive. But like
Okay.
I'm singing along. I think that's slightly more experienced than the actual act of packing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good on questions.
Me too.
I feel like I served you up a fair few contradictions in that one. Sorry.
But I'm more used to dealing with any contradictions. So I think the previous day kind of helped me understand.
Good. Okay, I think this is the last one. 12:49. So this was a lot later. Maybe I missed a beep or something. I was about to pluck my eyebrows. I was looking in the mirror and was singing a song lyric, which I've actually noted the lyric here. I've written that the lyric that I was singing was change in pressure. And then I've just written the word, well, it's not really a word. I wrote autopilot-y. So yeah, I was not actually plucking my eyebrows yet. I was looking in the mirror, holding the tweezers, about to do that. And I was mid-singing a song lyric, and that's it.
And is the singing present to you more than the singing of the previous beat, but the same amount, less than?
I think this one was a little bit more present because of the fact that I noted exactly the lyric that I was singing.
Okay. And is this a singing along? Is this song playing?
Yeah, it was on my speakers, and I was singing out loud with it. Yeah.
Okay. And is the singing out loud here, in what ways is it the same or different from the singing out loud in the previous beat? Singing along with.
I think I was more aware of the singing in this one.
And anything more than just like I've dialed up my awareness of it, but seems like the same thing, except I'm somewhat more aware of it, or does it seem like there's somehow different aspects?
I feel like that because at the exact time the beep went off with this, I wasn't consumed by another action yet, like I hadn't started plucking my eyebrows yet, so it's sort of in between things. So in that sense, like the singing was sort of the number one thing that I was consciously aware of that I was doing, whereas in the previous one I was halfway through packing my suitcase, so it was kind of more happening. And so like, yeah, I was singing along, but it wasn't as like at the forefront of my experience as this one, because this one, like the singing was the dominant thing I was doing.
And how do you experience the singing along? What is that, an action I'm experiencing myself as producing the words, or is that a sound I'm hearing myself singing, or is that neither one of those things, something else?
Yeah, I've written autopilot-y, which I know probably sounds like a contradiction to what I just said, but like I'm not super aware of like the sound that I'm making per se. It's more yeah, I don't know.
So I'm singing along, as meaning that the music and the words and the motion, whatever that takes, is being drawn out by the music. I'm accompanying the music, part of the music, whatever.
Yeah, more like it's an action that's happening, and it's experiential in the way that it's almost a feeling that's sort of happening as part of it, more so than like it being auditory or.
Okay. Then I think I'm good.
That's it. Oh yes, Julian, sorry, go.
Well, yeah, this is something I'm still quite unsure about this one
Mm,
because you seem sure of the singing, but then there's kind of these autopilot elements you mentioned.
yeah.
Um, do you think it's possible? Would you still entertain the possibility that singing was just the action and that it wasn't really experienced, apprehended, or?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe in the same way that, yeah, I can note when a beep goes off and I'm halfway through packing my suitcase, maybe this could be in the same category as that like the beep's gone off and I've noted that I was exactly in the middle of singing this song lyric and I know I was doing that and I experienced it to some degree, but yeah, maybe actually it is to the same degree that I describe when I'm describing any other action.
Yeah.
But
Go
I
ahead.
sort of feel like there was a bit more like emotion, a bit more feeling to it.
Yeah. If there is a feeling vibey thing there, could you be able to describe that, or you're not sure?
I'd say it's like exactly the same stuff that I said earlier and whatever of like, that sort of happiness, a sort of playfulness, a sort of optimism, like all those sorts of things, but with that vague veil covering everything.
So something vague, um, but if it is there, something happy, positive.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was curious about was you said, and this, I don't know exactly what you said, but something like, I was experiencing this because I wrote down the words. And I think Russ, you mentioned earlier that when people, I don't know, justify something by saying, "Oh, I noted it down,"
Mm-hmm.
then I mean, you didn't say I was experiencing it because like I had this inner experience that I remember and that I can talk about now.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of.
Yeah, I think the more that we have discussed this, then I think that it's just more like I was caught mid-action and that uh, maybe apart from like this sort of, there's definitely a vibey element to it. Really, I don't think it's that different to any other time I've been caught mid-action and describe it as sort of autopilot-y and really easily identifiably caught doing something that's physical. Like I think that that's just what's happened here, but I just wasn't super aware of it. So I was like, oh, well, it's really easy to identify. I was singing and I was caught in the act of doing that. But like in terms of inner experience, yeah, like I think it's the same as any other time when I describe it as like a bit autopilot, but also maybe a bit of a vibe and a state of being or whatever. But that I think it's that sort of thing.
And Russ, I'm wondering, how did you interpret this moment?
Well, I took her early in this conversation descriptions as being I'm more into the music on this beep than I was in the previous beep.
Mm-hmm.
And now I hear her saying, well, maybe it's the same thing. The beep caught me, whatever. And I'm guessing that of those two, the earlier one is probably more faithful to the experience than the last one because we've talked more about it and things get, the water gets muddied.
Mm.
But in no case did I hear her saying that she was really into the specific analytic whatever of the music. She was more bopping along to the music, singing along to the music than she was.
Yeah. Because you said, Mel, that you wrote down some exact words. Can you say what those are?
No, Julian.
Everyone frozen.
Julian frozen. Now he's unfrozen.
Yeah, I was asking because Mel, you said you wrote down some words. I was wondering what those were.
Oh yeah. The exact lyric I was singing was change and pressure. But I think that was noticeable because it's like it was the chorus of the song, so like that line gets sung over a lot, so it was just really easily identifiable. But yeah, in terms of like was I singing that song lyric and thinking like specifically about like what those, like, oh, change in pressure and like what that meant. No, like, you know, they were the words coming out of my mouth, but then it was more just experiential and whatnot, like not actually conceptually thinking about what those words mean.
And the experience was more about the singing those words or hearing those words, or not really about those words? Those words were just happening, but more about the general
vibe.
General vibiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm curious, Russ, because I thought you'd ask follow-ups about the vibe. I'm wondering why you didn't.
I guess I thought it would probably push too hard in a specific direction when I wasn't sure that either there wasn't anything specific, or if there was something specific, it had been lost in the conversation.
Okay.
And in response to your previous question, when Mel or somebody says what I wrote down is, I take that as being a way of saying, I can't remember. You're asking me a question. I'm trying to be responsive to your question. And so I'm going to tell you what I wrote down. But beyond that, I don't feel trustworthy or confident or whatever. If she had a clear recollection, she wouldn't say, I wrote down I was listening to the music. She would say, I was listening to the music. So I wrote down as a pretty strong underminer to my ear, usually. Okay. And I've been listening to Mel fairly carefully, and I don't see any reason to believe that she means that in any other way.
Okay.
She's saying, I wrote down, I'm not really sure here, but the best I could do when I had the chance, this is what I wrote.
Yeah.
Okay. So you sensed some uncertainty. You didn't want to push too far in some elements. But yeah, it sounds like you didn't like doubt all the way that it was completely autopilot. But you just didn't want to push too far on specific elements.
Right.
Okay. I'm good on questions.
Me too.
Well, that's it. That's all the beeps today.
That's the beeps.
Some bizarre ones for you.
Well, I still think I think these are interesting. They're interesting in the way that we're trying to get at the limits of nothing, something empty, autopilot-y.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked today, even though it was a bit embarrassing content-wise, but that the beep went off when I was in the middle of having something that feels like a real clear thought. You know, when I'm talking about that, when I was pondering what I'd say if I happened to meet Maddie Healy, like that's a really distinct thought that I was definitely having. And that's interesting because I know that I am capable of that, and that sometimes happens to me, but more often than not, it's that nothingness that we have come across a lot of times. So it was really interesting to have the beep go off when I am having definite clarity of a specific thought. Like I found that really interesting today.
And I had a similar reaction to that. Was Mel knows how to talk about inner experience when there is inner experience to talk about, and so that's a way of that's a ingredient in my understanding of what Mel's trying to tell us.
Yeah.
So shall we do it again?
Yes. So, we're going to have to change time zones for the next one because I'll be back in Australia.